Quick look ahead. The Utah Jazz have a big summer coming up. We found out kind of last weekend, though it was kind of known in these parts. The Jazz have apparently moved on from Ricky Rubio, so they got a big summer coming up here, Tim. You've got your two cornerstones in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Clearly, they didn't have enough offense or support last year for Donovan Mitchell. You know, I've said I think the Jazz have been built very, very well for the NBA regular season, but some matchups they had in the postseason, they weren't necessarily equipped with scorers and shooters, so it's got to be a priority this summer. As you look at the Jazz, and they'll probably have somewhere between about $30 and $33 million in cap room, depending on what they end up doing with favors. Do you see them as a candidate to make a big splash, or do you see them picking up multiple pieces and kind of piecing it together this summer?
You know, I really think that they're going to try to make a big splash. And, you know, obviously you're going to have contingency plans, and there's no guarantees. But if D'Angelo Russell's available, I do think that's a guy who makes a lot of sense for the Jazz. You know, Tobias Harris, I think, is probably the most available of the wings. You know, maybe in today's NBA, maybe even more of a stretch four. But, you know, he's a guy who can get you buckets. And that's clearly what the Jazz have been missing. And then maybe their big splash isn't necessarily in free agency. You know, maybe they can rekindle those trade talks for Mike Conley. And, you know, I think Conley, actually, of those guys, would probably be the best fit just because he is capable of playing off the ball. He's capable of running offense, of getting his own. He's a great defensive point guard. You know, he's a great locker room guy. I think that would be the absolute best case scenario for them, is to be able to, you know, get those talks with the Grizzlies going. Maybe soothe some of the hard feelings that came out of the last time they had those discussions, and try to get Mike Conley in Salt Lake City.
Do you think they've got the assets to make a deal? They had pretty good assets at midseason. They had a healthy Dante Exum. They had Ricky Rubio's expiring contract. I kind of feel like maybe some of those trade assets have kind of disappeared on them.
Well, I think if they're trading for Mike Conley, they're probably taking him into cap space, or at least primarily using cap space to acquire him, and I think you're giving up. It's about picks.
Okay.
I think, you know, primarily for the Grizzlies, that would be a deal that would be about picks and about getting off of obviously what's a big contract for a team that, you know, with the Grizzlies, clearly they're entering rebuilding mode. So you don't want to be an expensive rebuilding team, you know, especially in a small market like Memphis. So I think that. It not necessarily in terms of players going back, but that move for the Grizzlies would be about financial relief and then, you know, compensation in the future. Obviously, I'm talking about. I think the Grizzlies are going to ask for multiple first-round picks in that case.
Let's say they don't get Mike Conley, they can't revive those trade talks, but they do target the wing, maybe a Tobias Harris. You've seen him play enough. There's been conversation about it. How would you see Donovan Mitchell moving to point guard? Would that be a prudent move for the Jazz? Do you think he could make that transition?
You know, one of the kind of silver linings to Rubio going down last season is they got a lot of time to evaluate Donovan Mitchell at point guard, and I definitely think that's a legitimate option. There's no question about it. He's already the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands the most often. He really showed some progress in terms of his distribution, you know, being able to make the reads, being able to make the passes, you know, despite the fact that his job is kind of to be a gunner. You know, Donovan Mitchell is not a selfish player. He's going to make the right plays, or he's at least going to try to make the right plays. And I absolutely think, depending on how the chips fall, that Donovan Mitchell playing, you know, as their starting point guard is an option. Matter of fact, I've been told that by people who were part of the decision-making process for the Jazz.